Hi. Thank you all for coming. I actually was at Boston College when all these events took place. I wasn't involved in the events, but I graduated in 1979, and watching the film, it reminds me that at one time, I too had a mustache. Everybody at that time was very shocked, I guess, and intrigued by the scandal when it had occurred. And I actually kind of thought it was cool, I guess. But watching this film, I realized that there was much more going on. Having seen Goodfellas, too, I realized that there was a lot more below the surface. And not only is it like a black comic Rashomon with wise guys and basketball players, but it also touches on issues that are extremely relevant today, such as athletics and academia, journalistic integrity, the judicial system, and the sports culture. And the fact that these things are in the news today suggests that the film is extremely relevant. So I know you're all eager to ask questions, so I'll start out with a kind of essay question for the filmmakers. What was it that first drew you to the story? Why did you think it would make a good film? What were some of the difficulties and challenges you faced? And are you satisfied? And this is a multi.
That's a lot.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Well, I told this to anyone that would listen to me over the last 15 years or so, but I was personally drawn to it because I grew up in the same town as Jim. I'm the same age as Jim. We didn't know each other growing up, but we had mutual friends. Jim was somewhat of a local Trenton legend, both on the court and off the court. And as time went on and you know, the years went by, we went to neighboring high school, so I saw him up close. But it wasn't until I got out of college that Sports Illustrated article came out. And I just couldn't believe that this was the Jim Sweeney from Trenton that I had heard about and I had seen. 9 years later, Goodfellas comes out. And now this Henry Hill character, I go back and he's the same guy in the Sports Illustrated article. So I was always interested in trying to tell this story. And eventually I was able to, and then that's kind of years later what brought Cayman and I together.
Yeah, I was always fascinated with the movie Goodfellas and the mob, and you know, my generation, we loved it. And I ended up coming into contact with Paul Mazie, who actually went into witness protection for something else, and he's been hiding ever since. And I ended up getting his story, and when I heard about the BC fix, that was the first time I'd ever heard about it. Really, was through Paulie, and I'm like, what? You know, no one's ever done that story. So we started to reach out to all the mob people that were involved with it. Paulie still had contacts with different folks, and through other people, we found Henry Hill, and you know, it went from there. And then I heard that Joe Levine was interested in doing this movie and had been working on it for quite a while. So I showed up at his office one day, and we've been together ever since.
How did you get the footage from Goodfellas? How'd you, I mean, I thought it was brilliant that you got Ray Liotta to...
So can't be told.
That's a secret weapon.
It's like one of the many stories that we'll never know from this movie, that what the truth is. One question for Jim. What made you want to go back to all this after 35 years, and what was it like to go over all this again, and are you satisfied with the way the movie turned out?
Yeah, very satisfied with how it turned out. I don't think Yes, very satisfied with the way it turned out. Sorry about that. What prompted me to go back was Joe. Joe and I were from the same area of Trenton, New Jersey, and when he approached me, it was in such a way that there was a trust level. And I just felt good about moving forward. There's a lot, as you could tell in the film, it's a complex, convoluted story. And how my story had been told was really the seminal Sports Illustrated article that came out in February of 1981. And this is before, the internet days, where you could, just go on Google and find out other alternative views about what happened. But from 1981, and, fast forward, to the present, it's like no one ever came out with something that, maybe told my story or through the eyes of how this event transpired that could have been different that was originally told, by Sports Illustrated. So when Joe and Cayman approached me, I was just grateful for the opportunity to move forward. I was hesitant at first because over the years, many people, had contacted my wife and myself, whether it was for stories in a magazine, for books, for other documentaries, but I just had a comfort level, with Joe and with Cayman.
Do you feel like you've reached closure now, or do you really have to make some sort of contact with Boston College before you feel like this is all in the past?
Oh, I would like to hear from them. I mean, we've made a number of, there were a number of opportunities in which we've reached out, over the course of the last several years, but we've never heard back from them. Certified letters, emails, people that I'd personally spoken with, they just, wanted to pretend as if this never happened.
So if Mr. Kuhn showed up and was on this panel, sort of like the reunion between the two mobsters at the end of the movie, what would you say to him?
I have no animosity. Sometimes things just happen in life. And when you're young, when you think, you could pretty much dictate how you want things to happen for yourself. They could be selfish decisions, which were the case, that involved Rick. He tried to pull other people in, and, I'm sure he regrets having made, some of the decisions he made in the past, but I don't have any animosity. I mean, I've been really fortunate. The girl I dated in college, I met her in 1977. We've been married, for 33 years, and I've had a wonderful life. And sometimes in life, things have a way of finding you that are much bigger, than you could ever expect. And it happened to me. And I think that, I think with the TEDx talks, Jane Fonda had once said, we're all living life, longer. So this is like our third act that Jane Fonda refers to. And I think in the case of me and my wife, it's our third act. And based on what's happened with this documentary, I think it's going to open doors for us. And it's going to take us to places that we would have never envisioned that we were going to go at this stage of our lives. So for that, I'm grateful.
As the district attorney, do you think that justice was done in this case? Do you think that perhaps Mr. Kuhn was a scapegoat and that he was sort of sacrificed to get the big fish, which was Henry Hill? And was your judgment clear even though you were a MIFT BC alumnus?
Well, if anything, I would have tried to quash the case rather than to prosecute the case. But that just wasn't in the cards. That wasn't going to happen. Well, certainly I don't think it was appropriate that Rick Kuhn received initially a 10-year sentence. The sentence after he cooperated was reduced to 5 years. And we were able to get him released from the prison in Texas, and he went to a halfway house in Pittsburgh after, I think it was 26 months or 24 months or something like that. So, yeah, he was not a scapegoat. I mean, certainly he deserved to be convicted. He deserved to go to prison, I thought. Certainly, as I said, he didn't deserve to go to prison for 10 years. But he was not a scapegoat. He was a way, he enabled us to make a case and to sort of enhance the credibility of our case against Jimmy Burke. I mean, when we looked at the case, prosecutors, quite honestly, have to be concerned with how their reputations are going to pan out at the end of a prosecution. No one wants to lose a case because they have a stake in winning. And when we looked at the Burke case, certainly he was the great white whale, and we were interested in making a case against him because of the Lufthansa robbery in which he was the mastermind and all the other crimes in which he participated. But when we looked at it, we said, well, look, Kuhn has an idiot for a lawyer, and he's not going to take a plea. The evidence against him is overwhelming. At the end of this case, the headlines in the back of all the tabloids are going to say the Rick Kuhn basketball player is convicted. And if Burke gets acquitted, no one's going to pay any attention. It's going to be in the 8th paragraph. So we're going to take a shot. The case against him is very weak, but we're hoping that there's a spillover effect. The strength of the case against the other 4 defendants would be such that, as the woman who was the forelady of the jury said, that she felt that enhanced the value of our case against Burke. So yes, we were interested in making, he was the guy we wanted to convict. The other guys were sort of bystanders, but they weren't innocent bystanders.
By the way, you were terrific in Goodfellas.
Thanks.
Did you get any more offers after that? Or?
I've been in 3 other movies.
Really? Tell us about
I
that.
played a priest in my last movie, but I was a degenerate gambler.
Which movie was that?
There's a movie called At the Sinatra Club. It was actually made by somebody by the name of Sal Polisi, who wrote the screenplay and was the producer of the movie. Sal is another individual I put in the witness protection program. He was involved in the Colombo crime family. And for some crazy reason, I managed to stay in touch with all these people. I stayed friendly with Henry until he died 2.5 years ago. I still, to this day, I continue to talk to Rick Kuhn. And I was with him when he spoke. It was at Princeton at an all-American basketball camp that Nike was running in 1990. And I called Rick and I asked him if he would go down and do it, and he agreed to do it. But since then, he's been very close-mouthed about it. And I tried to encourage him. I thought maybe he might get a payday from these people. But he declined. I don't know what his arrangements were, but I encouraged him to cooperate. And I think he just wants to put it past himself, and he didn't want to cooperate.
So it's a nice little sideline to the DA business.
Well, I haven't been doing that since 1989. I've been in private practice since then.
I think I'll open the discussion to people in the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Can we? Do we have a microphone to deliver? Why don't you speak up really loud?
First of all, it's a great documentary. My wife, 1979, freshman at BC. You were a hero, huge crush on you. You talked about how I'm interested to know if the guys trying to get in touch with anybody, from the administration back then, the AD, the president, anybody, and the fact that Dr. Tom went on to a pretty good coaching career at Iowa and then at Maryland, and he tried to, it seemed like he just didn't like you from the get-go for whatever reason. You said in the film he tried to get you tricked. I mean, how do you feel about all of this? I'm more interested about the administration, Dr. Tom, the AD, the president of the school. You're telling me nobody had any inkling at all that this was going on? It's hard to believe that a coach at a Division I school didn't even have an inkling that this was going on at all. Do you guys believe that at all? Or?
Well, Ed, I don't know if you heard the question, but they're asking about Dr. Tom, and I know you probably talked to him during the investigation.
I did. Tom Davis was a witness. He was actually a defense witness, but the 2 nights before he testified, I spent with him preparing my cross-examination. So he was very cooperative with us, and he was a very effective witness for the prosecution. I spoke to him about it. I'm convinced that he had no inkling that anything was going on. He thought that the players were doing the best they could. And in fact, the cross-examination was designed to show that if players were trying to throw games, if they were trying to shave points, they wouldn't necessarily have to miss shots. They would be diving an instant too soon to get a ball. You know, everybody would think, well, they're hustling, they fell on the ground, they scraped their knees, they must be trying really hard. You jump an instant too soon, you don't get the rebound. So, you know, I mean, Ed Guevara, the FBI agent, talked about how he went up to Boston and watched the films. I think Ed's recollection is just off base, because we decided we weren't going to do that. Because if we got into a trial, we said, well, here's where Sweeney missed his free throw. And, well, then they'd be able to come back and they'd be able to show how Sweeney made 3 jump shots in a row and, you know, make 6 excellent passes. So we weren't going to do that. The only reason that I had the agents come up to BC to watch the games, because in those days you only had films that could be kept in one place. It wasn't like you had, you know, the internet or whatever. So they had to come up and watch these old-fashioned movies. And it's the only reason to do it is, let's see if we can see if Rocco is in the stands, or if you know, at the Harvard game, can we see Henry in the stands? So that's why we looked at the films. But If you go back and you look at the films, I'm sure you're not going to be able to detect point shaving. No one is going, you know, I missed a shot, ha 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 ha. I don't, you know, Kevin O'Malley, Kevin, I forget the assistant coach, Kevin Mackey. He didn't know. I'm sure they didn't have any inkling. I mean, Mike Bowie said, I never met Mike Bowie, but he said he had some sort of sense that something was going on. You know, that was never communicated to us. Nobody really had any idea that this was happening except for the players who were involved. And there's one other player who was actually had been approached, and that's Joe Ballou. We would say, but we know his name is Bolio, but I think he pronounces it Ballou. He was approached and refused to take anything from Kuhn, refused to participate, but you know, he cooperated with us and told us about what had happened.
That's one thing that I found a little interesting is that they identified him as the paper I'm writing for identified him falsely as one of the
Oh, you mean Mike Bowie?
yeah, as one of the people who was responsible. Was there an element of race in that, or I know this is like back in the 70s.
You know, I really I'm laughing because I was accused in a book by an author who happens to be here tonight of having some racist motives when you know, I didn't prosecute Jim, but I prosecuted Ernie Cobb. I also prosecuted all the other 5 white guys who were sitting there, including Kuhn. Look, I have no idea why Leslie Visser printed that, why she covered the trial. I think she did an excellent job. I thought her reporting was outstanding, and obviously she went on to great things with